Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Joe Patrick on Football, which it's always good to be doing them from the sidelines here at Mercedes-Benz Stadium after the games, but it's especially good when the Falcons have an exciting win like they did here on Monday Night Football here tonight, beating the Rams 27-24 in what was ultimately a thrilling game. It looked like it was going to be everything was going swimmingly for the Falcons early in this game, up 21-0, heading into halftime off of a 93-yard Bijan Robinson run, which we'll talk about in a second. The second half was kind of characterized by some of the miscues we've seen this team have from time to time this season, especially on special teams. Another glaring special teams mistake that puts the Rams in contention to win this game, and very well could have won this game if the ball bounces a different way, especially those last three kind of heaves that the team was taking toward that end zone behind me. Matt Stafford really had Xavier Smith, one of his receivers, streaking open right down this sideline. And if he puts it on him, it's probably a touchdown. The Falcons actually end up losing this game. Ultimately, though, all those bad fears don't come to pass. The Falcons do escape with, again, that 27-24 victory. Are you happy about that? Are you not happy about that? I saw some kind of conflicted feelings. Like I said, we've talked about it on the show before, like my friends and family texts that I get. I always like to use that as just a barometer of where Falcons fans are, generally speaking. So I feel like there is, it's not everybody's kind of the same page. I had some family members saying that they were definitely going to blow that lead toward the end of the game. That person was almost proved correct, but they were not. I had other friends who were, and I think this is the most popular sentiment about this team right now. They're just frustrated with the way that the season has transpired, given what we saw on the field tonight, which was just some incredibly talented players for this Atlanta Falcons team that are not going to be represented in the playoffs because the team did not get it done when they needed to. And then there are, of course, some other fans who are just like so there are some who kind of, I don't know if they're actively wanting the team to lose, but they're perturbed by seeing them play well, almost like it's kind of twisting the knife to an extent. Of course, I have some fans who are just, some friends who are just straight up happy about what they saw tonight. True Falcons believers, and I do enjoy that kind of fan as well. But, however you feel about it, whether you like it or not, this team is ending the season on a very strong note, and we have to consider what that means for Raheem Morris's future, for Terry Fontenot's future, how that will be reflected in the decisions that ultimately get made at the end of the season, which we know are coming. We know that there are going to be some changes, some that were leaked in the media on Sunday from Jay Glazer, which we'll talk about in a second later on the show. And we'll probably go into some more detail later this week about obviously that Matt Ryan report, but we'll talk about it here in a little bit. But let's talk more about what happened on the field tonight in this game, and it was the Bijan Robinson show. That's what it is sometimes for the Falcons. That's sometimes what they rely upon. We talked to Kirk Cousins after the game, speaking about, and he was talking about how we have to make it so that we don't rely, as talented as Bijan Robinson is, that's punishment. That's kind of damage that running backs take in this league when they're utilized to that extent. And we can't do that with Bijan Robinson this often if we want him to have this long, successful career that I think everybody in the NFL, everybody in the world knows that Bijan Robinson has the talent to have one of the best careers we've seen from a running back. I mean, the skills that he puts on display week in, week out is evidence of itself. But I mean, what we saw here tonight was ridiculous. He has his career-long run in college or the pros with that 93-yard scamper. Again, that puts the team up 21-0 going into halftime. That was huge for momentum, huge for giving the team some breathing room to make some mistakes, and kind of allowed them ultimately to make that catastrophic error on the blocked field goal. And it didn't fully come back to bite them, although I would say it obviously came back to bite them because that kind of turned the tide on a lot of things and ultimately got the Rams to a point where they had this game tied late on. But, ultimately the team gets the job done, and offensively for the Falcons, Kirk Cousins only had 20 passing attempts in this game, partially because the Falcons were up by so much and they're trying to run clock. The other reason is because Bijan Robinson is obviously so effective in being able to do that they wanted to kind of keep giving him the ball, keep feeding him and letting him do his thing. And ultimately, he proved the team correct for doing so, just with an outstanding day. 229 total yards is what I have it at in my notepad here. 2 touchdowns on the day. Had his first touchdown of the game and a little soft touch pass to the corner on what was ultimately kind of like a shallow drag that Kirk is able to find him on late in the progression. Just an unbelievable, and that just goes to show the array of skills that Bijan Robinson has, whether it's receiving, whether it's breaking off some of these long runs, which was the knock on him coming into this year. And one of the things that we talked about during OTAs and during training camp was this want for him to be able to bust some of these long runs and actually go the distance and go for touchdowns. And we've seen that this year in prime time, by the way, twice. In fact, on the 2 Monday night games, and on Monday night against the Bills, he breaks off a long one, going that same direction down that same sideline for a touchdown, and does it, even to a greater extent tonight with a 93-yard run. So showing that breakaway speed, where I think that there were some people that were wondering whether he actually had that level of speed in him to be able to, carry those long runs into the end zone for touchdowns, and he certainly showed that he does have that speed. And I can't remember what run it was that he had where he got dragged down. I believe it was in the Washington game, where he does kind of get run down from behind. Well, it turns out that guy who ran him down tracked like one of the fastest on-field GPS, miles per hour times, of the season, and even going back several seasons, I believe, I want to say. So while that made Bijan kind of look bad getting chased down from behind, that guy was motoring on that particular time. One other interesting thing that Bijan noted in his press conference tonight, which is that, if you're familiar with Mercedes-Benz Stadium, if I can angle this, it's like there's not a Jumbotron that the players can look at to see the defenders who are behind them, because it's a halo board is literally directly above us. That's where we see Raheem Morris looking quite a bit. And so if you're a ball carrier, you just don't have as great of a sense of what's around you in this stadium as you might have in some other stadiums. So I thought that was an interesting little thing that Bijan threw in there when he was talking this evening. But on that note of the team kind of constantly going to him, especially in crucial situations, clutch moments. I did notice he has what proves to be the gain that kind of put the Falcons in the lead toward the end with 21 seconds left, which was a 10-yard toss that he had right over to this sideline. And I noticed before that play, he had run the ball a few times. They're kind of grinding the clock, getting down the field. And he's about to go off. He has a run towards the sideline, is going off the field, and then late on, while the team is kind of in the nearing a huddle, he gets back out there. Tyler Algier comes off the field. It was a short down situation. I believe it was 3rd and 1, and they run a toss. So they do not run it right up the middle in that short yardage. They run the toss, and I asked Bijan Robinson about that, and he said that it's similar to an instance that happened in the Tampa Bay game here recently, where Zach Robinson wanted him on the field for a specific play. I believe in that moment it was for either a check down that he caught, or maybe it was for that David Sills catch. But anyway, Zach Robinson kind of specifically asked Bijan to go back out on the field, even though he was tired in that instance. And it was the same thing tonight. Bijan was taking himself out of the game, but Zach said, "I need you for this play because I've got one dialed up that we think is going to work for us in this situation." And of course, lo and behold, Bijan's able to pick up 10 yards, and that 10 yards was important because not only did it pick up that first down for the Falcons, but it put them in pretty comfortable field goal range, especially the way that Zane Gonzalez is kicking. I mean, while we're talking about special teams, and obviously the Falcons had another major blunder tonight, like we mentioned, worth noting that Zane Gonzalez is looking how you want your NFL kicker to be. And it's just a real shame that it's coming this late in the season and that they just didn't have this quality of kicker throughout, because if they did, I think this team would be in a different place right now. And it's amazing to think, because so many things happened in this game. Xavier Watts, for example, has 2 interceptions. That gives him the most for a Falcons rookie since Deion Sanders. I'm just kind of laughing you have the best rookie defensive back since Deion Sanders. You've got Bijan Robinson, who's given you the best running season from a running back this franchise has ever seen. I thought I would never see anything better than Jamal Anderson's 1998 season, that year, or the 97-98 season, when the Falcons went to the Super Bowl, where he just seemed unstoppable, and the Dirty Bird was, of course, that famous touchdown dance was coined. I thought I would never see anything better than that. Bijan Robinson's killing that season. In fact, that's not even the season that was the record breaker. It was one of the Willie Andrews seasons. So Bijan Robinson comes out. He's having this great year that we have not seen before in Atlanta. A borderline like all-time NFL type of season. We're seeing James Pierce be a Defensive Rookie of the Year candidate. We're seeing this team in general have the second most sacks in the NFL. All these things happening for a team that was basically practically eliminated from playoff contention by Thanksgiving. Like, what the hell is the deal? And the deal is special teams. The deal is that in that first game of the season against the Tampa Bay Bucks, you don't have, you missed the kick that could have sent it to overtime. Same thing against games against the Panthers. I mean, there's so many games. We could go through the whole season. The Colts game in Berlin, so many opportunities have just slipped by this Falcons team that has made it so that these great accomplishments that some of the individual players have amassed over the course of the season are just going to go, shamefully, undernoticed, not unnoticed, but undernoticed by the national spotlight, basically, the national fan base and media, because they're not going to be represented in the playoffs. And that's just a massive shame for these players. And I certainly hope for, all of them individually that this team can get it together. Get it together, Falcons. These guys can, be showcased to the world, because when they have played in prime time this season, last season, they've played really well. When they've played on Monday Night Football this season, obviously they had this win against the Rams. They beat the Bills. Last year, they beat the Eagles, the eventual Super Bowl champions, on the road in Week 2 on Monday Night Football. They've played well in prime time as well against teams like the Bucks multiple times. Even last year against the Chiefs, in a game that they lost, it was a very respectable loss, and that very well could have been a win. Have a referee made the call that he should have made in that game, but I digress. Ultimately, this team shows up when the lights are the brightest. That's what's most frustrating about this Falcons team, is that it's the sleepy 1 o'clock game in October that they have just slept through, getting blown out by the Carolina Panthers, getting blown out by a 1-win Miami Dolphins team at the time. So many of these uncompetitive games, just too many for a team that really has playoff aspirations. And it's just unfortunate that they're not going to be there, because, we saw on display tonight just the amount of talent that is on this team. Actually, we didn't even see the full arsenal, really, of what this team can do when you consider that Drake London only had 1 catch for 4 yards. It was non-factor. Kyle Pitts, I believe, only has 2 catches, something like that. He had a big one, a very important catch toward the end of this game on that final drive that led to the field goal, but ultimately wasn't nearly as big of a part of this game as he has been in the previous 2. But we have seen, obviously, what those players can do in the past, and it's just, again, it's just a shame that we're not going to see them in the playoffs. And, with this team finishing strong, it's worth noting that they are now 3-0 since they were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. Also worth noting, this team has scored 24 or more points in 5 of their final 6 games of this season. Those 6 games obviously correlate with when Kirk Cousins took over as a starting quarterback after Michael Penix was injured. Team has offensively been relatively consistent since then. Obviously tonight, they scored 27 points. They had 7 from an interception from Jesse Bates that he takes back to the house for a touchdown for a pick 6. So it's not like the offense is necessarily scoring all those points, but I'm just looking at the team totals, and they've done that 5 of the last 6 games. Compared to the first 10 games of the season before Kirk took over as the regular starter, only 4 out of the 10 games did they score 24 points. And again, I haven't gone through all those games and seen if there were any defensive scores or whatnot, but or how many were given up from special teams, whatnot. But anyways, we're just seeing, I think, offensively, a better operation. It just feels a little bit more consistent. Nowhere near the level of effectiveness, especially week in, week out, that you would want to see. Again, tonight was nothing special. I mean, Kirk Cousins was 13 for 20 for not many yards. He was having some success early in this game, gotten a little better rhythm, but ultimately, he wasn't the game changer, or the game didn't kind of rest on him. But it kind of rested on this offense's ability to just kind of scratch out what they needed to get the job done. Ultimately, they do that. So it's a credit to all these guys, I think. It's a credit to Kirk. It's a credit to, frankly, the coaching staff. And we've given the coaching staff definitely their fair share of criticisms. And I think a lot of those criticisms don't just go away because the team is doing well to end the season. You have to judge the team based off of their own stated objectives and their failures to reach those objectives. But ultimately, you have to call it like it is. And the way it is that this team is playing some of the best football that we've seen them play this season at this point in time. Not that this game was necessarily a reflection of the best football they can play, but it's worth noting that they still win this game. Maybe their best win of the season, despite not playing probably the best football they could play, considering some of those guys we mentioned not really being huge parts of the game. And a lot of that's game state related. But, it's just I think a lot of emotion for Falcons fans just when you kind of are trying to digest all of this stuff. And, I want to give Raheem Morris credit for, having this team ready to play. And, Terry Fontenot also, I think, deserves some credit for having built a locker room that was not going to shut down. That was not going to be selfish and say, okay, there's nothing left in it for me. Like we're kind of checking out. Our star players are checking out their, or held management, like kind of holding players out. Like we're seeing at some other teams around the league with players who clearly want to be playing. It's just a really a testament to everybody that they've been able to rally, even though it doesn't matter, and. But don't tell the players that it doesn't matter, because every game matters to them, at least those guys in that locker room, and that's a testament to them. Again, we'll talk more about this. I don't want anybody to get too carried away with what I'm saying about this as like what I necessarily think should happen toward the end of the season, but I think we just have to recognize that it is what it is. And it's kind of a shame that it's just that this team is showing what they're capable of, and they're not going to make the playoffs. And it's going to get a little bit interesting coming up this week, because the Falcons really hold actually they've set the Panthers up really well. Panthers basically either have to win against the Buccaneers, or the Falcons beat the Saints to put the Panthers into the playoffs. So the Falcons will have something ultimately to say about the way that this season's going to shake out in the NFC South. Now let's get to that Matt Ryan rumor. So obviously Jay Glazer has the big rumor, or not rumor, I mean this is obviously well reported. It's been further corroborated by The Athletic and other journalistic outlets that this is a real thing, that these are real talks that are taking place between the Falcons and Matt Ryan. And there's obviously something behind it. Whether it's actually like sealed and done, it doesn't sound like it's there yet as to what's been reported, but I would say that it does track with some of the things that we've talked about. We had a kind of I almost refer to it as like an emotional show where we really kind of got to talk about the cultural problems that this club has had, and some of the issues they've faced over the last several seasons, and just trying to find themselves and trying to reestablish that winning culture that can get them back to obviously where they want to be. And we talked about the Lions as being potentially a model for the Falcons to follow, where they at the time bring in Chris Spielman, who just so happened to be a former player. I never really thought it had to be a former player, or like a legendary former player like Chris Spielman was for the Lions and as Matt Ryan is for the Falcons. We don't even know what this front office position is at this point in time. I don't know if it's going to be like what Chris Spielman is, which is a newly created position called special assistant to the owner. But I kind of think it's something like that. That's the way I'm kind of reading the tea leaves at this point in time. Where I do think people are getting a little bit out over their skis is like assuming that this is a GM or GM related type of position where he's going to like directly be making transactional decisions for this team. And I don't think it's going to be that clear cut. Like I think that this team will obviously still have a GM, whether that's Terry Fontenot or somebody else. And I don't think that Matt Ryan is not going to come in and all of a sudden be the guy who has the final say on things, but I think that he's obviously like a qualified person to come in and give his input on things, a lot of things, whether that's a player that they want to draft or sign, whether that's any number of things. Like, I thought it was great on Zach Klein's podcast, and I'm kicking myself. I don't remember the name of the podcast, but Zach Klein, obviously from Channel 2, has got that podcast with Todd France, Matt Ryan, Aaron Donald. And Matt Ryan had that rant about that the roof here in Mercedes-Benz Stadium should have been open for that game that they lost brutally against the Miami Dolphins on, like, he was like, it's a wet, cloudy, rainy, dreary day. Like, the Dolphins suck in that kind of weather. Like, that roof should be open. Now, I don't even know if this roof is like, if they're allowed to open the roof when weather conditions are like that, like with different things related to like the way that the stadium operates and such. But those kinds, like that kind of input, I think is the idea. It's allowing Matt to kind of come in and have some say, try to establish some culture, things in the building, things here in the stadium, just different things, and it's really hard to pin it down. Like we've talked about with Chris Spielman. Chris Spielman came in. If anybody missed that podcast, just give a brief kind of recap on what his role was with the Lions. The Lions were having some ownership transition. They had this new owner that was taking over, and she needed help. She had to go out and hire a GM and a head coach. Tough thing to do when you're just kind of coming into the situation. And so she reached out to Chris Spielman wanting him to be the GM. He declined that offer, but he said, I will help you find the GM. And so he came in as, again, the special assistant to the chairperson / president / owner. And he kind of led the process that ultimately resulted in the Lions hiring Brad Holmes, who's been a roaring success. Then after they hired Brad Holmes, he stays on and helps go through the head coaching search, where they ultimately hire Dan Campbell, who wants to eat kneecaps, and everybody laughed at that and thought it was ridiculous and how they're so stupid for hiring this tobacco-spitting, bash your head through a wall type of head coach. Turns out there's a lot more to Dan Campbell than that, but that's, but it took someone like Chris Spielman to kind of understand all the nuances involved and understand that actually this is the right guy for us. And even though they were not successful at all in that first year, which led to them being able to draft Aiden Hutchinson, I believe, with the 2nd overall pick. I mean, that was a home run pick, and they've just been kind of onwards and upwards from there, and they have a real culture about them now. Like the Detroit Lions, I know for a lot of fans it might not seem weird, but like for me, as someone who grew up, even like they were known for having Barry Sanders and being terrible. That was the Lions. They were known for dysfunction, for being flaky, and just generally not successful. They hadn't been to the playoffs, I think 3 times or something since 1950, before they just got back and have had a couple years getting back there recently. So, but all that was set in by Chris Spielman, obviously with those 2 hires. But he still stays on. He's still in this exact position in which he was originally brought in for, a special assistant to the CEO / chairperson, and he touches everything. He has an input on everything. If it's in the draft room, he's playing devil's advocate to Brad Holmes about some player they're going to draft. Even if he thinks it's the right choice to make, he's at least kind of offering, some counterpoint as to, why something else might be better that they need to consider. But he's also doing so many other things, quirky things. He's putting the cheerleaders through tackling drills. He's out there on the practice field, kind of playing Mike linebacker and kind of offering tips to guys, whether it's an offensive guy who's trying to read him or maybe some of his own linebackers. He's out there just offering his wisdom from having played the position for so long. He's leading the business side of the Lions in football, not football 101. I believe that he's leading them in some pretty intensive football presentations, basically, teaching them literally alignments, defensive alignments, what the difference is between not just a 3-4, 4-3, but this kind of stuff that a business person wouldn't necessarily need, you would think, but they kind of do. And you just want to build that cohesive culture that is just focused on football and winning. He's also role played as a cynical Lions fan on for the season ticket salespeople on how to actually sell tickets better. So he kind of does it all. And I don't know what Matt Ryan's role could be for this organization. but I don't think they can do wrong by bringing him in. I think that there's only good things that come from that. And of course, that he'll need support, but I do think there are good people and effective people, despite this team's record this year and how frustrating it's been, that can help him along the way. And I think there could potentially, obviously, be some more faces. Like, we don't even know if Terry Fontenot will be that GM if he were to come in. So those decisions are yet to be made, yet to be announced. But I'm really encouraged by the Matt Ryan news, and we may talk about it a little bit more later this week on the podcast. So thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Joe Patrick on Football. If you're watching this, you can watch it on YouTube, on 92.9 The Game's YouTube channel. If you're watching this and you want to get us on just audio version on the go, in the car or whatever, just search Joe Patrick on Football wherever you get podcasts, and we should pop up there for you where you can then follow. If you are watching this, please click like. That will send you more of these in the future, so it only helps you to just give us a like there, and maybe leave your feedback in the comments on what you think about Matt Ryan, what you think about this game, what you think about the way that the season is ending, which is a positive, but is a positive a negative? Maybe for some people, but personally, I'll just speak for myself as someone who covers this team. Like, I just like to see the guys happy, like the players, the coaches. Like, I know they work really hard, and no matter what comes of them and their careers after this season and beyond, you just want to see people succeed and be successful. So I'm happy to see that. So I'll just say that for myself. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll have more later this week.